All right. Hello, everyone. Time for the next panel. My name is Larry Heath. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of the AU Review, and really excited to bring you an incredibly easy topic today. We're going to predict everything that's about to happen in the future of the music industry, so you've picked the right panel. We're going to go through each of these great panelists and get them to introduce themselves to you. And everyone on this panel comes from a very different background and works in completely different areas in the industry. So the way I think we're going to go about this panel is focus on each one at a time as we go through and kind of discuss the points within. So we'll and then we'll open up for questions at the end. So if we want to start with you, Frank, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Frank Catella from One Love Music Group. Do you want me to go into history?
No, yeah, we'll go through that in a bit. Yeah, just name and what you do, and then we'll go one by one.
I own One Love Music Group. We're a record label. We're a publishing company, touring. We've also I was also partners and co-creator of Stereosonic Music Festival, which we recently sold 2 years ago. Yeah, so we're just all-round music company. I know
my name is Archie Hamilton. I run a touring and promotion company in Shanghai. We've been in China for 11 years. We have 3 festivals. We tour about 100 bands through the region every year. We do work for brands, and we have a couple of little media properties as well. Yeah, all-round music guy too.
I'm Paul Sloan from Billions Australia and Supersonics. I am an agent predominantly for about 60 clients, so people like Nick Cave and Arcade Fire, Bon Iver, things like that. We do representation for Australia and New Zealand, and I have a promoter company in Western Australia, so I do festivals and events there, and I play in a couple of bands and have 4 chickens.
My name is Joel Ross. I'm an immersive technologist. I specialise in how immersive technology can be commercialised and implemented into the music industry and events industry. I'm event director of a new event series which is going to run over the next 12 months called the Future of Music Industry Network, which is designed to prioritise and list all the problems of the music industry as one big to-do list. And we collectively work through those solutions, and at the end of the 12 months we present the new music industry model plus the transitional strategy from this music industry to that one. And I also am creating a virtual reality event planning solution, and yeah.
I'm Monique. I run Positive Feedback, which is a music PR and artist management company. Artists that we work with range from Alice in Wonderland to Safia to Slumberjack, who's actually with One Love.
I've never met you before.
Hello, how are you? Nice to meet you. As well as manage a band called Little May.
All right. Well, we're going to start in Asia, and we're going to talk about the new touring circuits that are emerging there. Archie, talk us a little bit through how the touring scene operates in China. I mean, this is one of many areas in Asia that hasn't had contemporary Western music touring in it for long. It's not an easy place to tour. It's not an easy. It's not an instinctive place for people to go still as an artist, but that's changing. So tell us a little bit about what you do and how you do it.
Well, we've been in China for 11 years, and we very much set up the business to create a music market in China, because when I arrived in late 2004, there wasn't a single live music venue in Shanghai or Beijing. There was one in Beijing actually that had just opened. There was one festival in China. And basically, I think 99.9999% of the population had never been to a live show of any shape or form. So I had a kind of idea that, and I don't know what I was basing the idea on, because I had no idea of anything about China at all. I didn't even know who Mao was when I arrived. It's pretty sad how ignorant I was. but you know, I had this kind of instinctive feeling that there was something about to happen. So I wrote a deck and just met a bunch of people over the first 6 months of being there, and basically said to a bunch of brands, international brands that had arrived in China over the last kind of the previous 5 or 10 years with big budgets to sort of conquer this new territory that had this huge potential market, and said, would you like to be responsible for the birth of the live music industry in China? There's a huge opportunity here, let's do it together. So we managed to blag $1 million off Bacardi, who, you know, the marketing director was an Australian fresh off the boat. We were kind of fresh off the boat, but maybe a couple of months before, and a little more cynical. And so he gave us a bunch of money, even though we didn't have a company. We kind of pretended we did. And so we ran a series of live events where we created the venues ourselves. We brought in some international bands. We paired them up with some local bands. We got a lot of traction with that in the first year, and then we had a festival at the end of it, which was kind of joint sponsored by Bacardi and myself. And you know, sort of wonderful sort of circular fate. I lost all the money that I made off Bacardi on the festival, so you know, karma. Never pretend you have a company when you don't. So over the last 10 years, you know, we've grown to about 40,000 sort of permanent capacity live houses across Shanghai. So from, you know, venues of 150, 200 up to, you know, 3 arenas, 3 purpose-built arenas of 12,000 plus. We've now got, you know, where there was one festival in China when I launched my first festival in 2007. When I did our last festival in Shanghai a month ago, there were 12 big music festivals in Shanghai alone over that month. So, you know, and then you multiply that out. Obviously, Shanghai is the most trafficked in terms of festivals, but you multiply that out, there are probably 250 to 300 festivals in China now. And there's a touring circuit of 60 to 100 different cities that bands go on. So, you know, huge, in a decade, a lot of growth. I don't think anyone's made any money yet. You know, it's still very much a bunch of people who are doing it because they love it. There's actually one company called Modern Sky in Beijing who launched their first festival the same day that we launched our first festival. They now have 25 festivals across China. They have one in New York, one in Seattle, one in LA, and one in Helsinki. It's kind of weird. And they just got, they've had 3 rounds of venture capital, and they just got valued at 3 billion renminbi, which is about $500 million US. So there's a lot of money floating around in those markets, not just China, the rest of Asia as well.
What's happening in China, does that represent what's happening in other parts of Asia?
Well, we have a touring agency that runs bands and DJs and stuff through the whole region. So I've got 4 agents working out of Shanghai who just book tours through the region.
So what are some of the other parts to that? Because, you know, like a place like Japan might have it separate.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at Japan and Australia as the sort of geographical outliers, you know, developed markets in this hemisphere, whether it's a eastern or a southern hemisphere kind of thing, you know, they very much have their own developed markets. You know, the rest of Asia is you know, Singapore's maybe a kind of halfway house. You know, it's kind of developed pretty quickly into a sort of first world city, I suppose. But the rest of Asia, you know, it kind of goes down through the tiers. You know, Seoul is pretty advanced down to kind of, you know, Manila's still gangster warfare kind of thing, and then Vietnam is Vietnam and Cambodia and Laos. You know, that I've taken bands into Myanmar and Laos and Cambodia, but they're still very, very much just bands that want to go in there and just see it and be there. We pay for it, you know.
Is that mainly at this point what bands are getting out of that, or are they really growing fan bases in that? Those regions?
I mean, you know, we've now had, you know, bands or artists that have come through first, maybe 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. We brought them back for. So I mean, an example that I use quite a lot. You know, we've had some successes. I wouldn't say we're up anywhere near kind of 50%. We're probably around 20-30% of bands that we bring through that. I mean, our strike rate's getting much better the more experienced we become. But you know, we brought Oliver Arnolds, who's a kind of neoclassical composer, through the region in 2009 for his first tour. We paid him $900 for a 3-city tour, and that landed. And you know, he had a grant from Iceland, which helped. And we just brought him through this month for a 7-city tour of Asia, and he netted about 200 grand. So that's in 6 years. You know, it's a pretty decent increase in both fan base and money. And you know, there are probably 20 or 30 artists that we've worked with who have had that kind of effect. It's not linear. It's certainly not. You know, some of it's driven by Western media and Western hype, but it's not linear at all. And you know, there's a network of people around the region who are now looking at that. There's a lot of money, investment money that's interested in this area. There are a lot of companies. You know, Frank and I were just talking. He's just been up to China for the big EDM festival in Shanghai that's been there for 3 years. You know, the big tech companies in China particularly, but across the region, have more money than you can imagine. I mean, it's kind of scary. You know, I don't think anyone in the Western world really appreciates how much money there is in China at the moment and how aggressively they're targeting global growth. But it's also an interesting, you know, they're not very good or experienced at coming out of China. They're unbelievable business people within the Middle Kingdom, but when they come out, they're like kind of rabbits in headlights. They don't understand how the market works. The core principles of being a Chinese businessman is basically be as ruthless as you can and fuck as many people as you can to get the most that you can. And obviously that doesn't work quite so well. It's a little bit more disguised in the West. So Chinese businessmen are kind of coming out with that mentality, and people aren't reacting very nicely to it.
Opening up to the rest of the panel, how is Asia influencing your businesses? Are you thinking about that market? I mean, it's on our doorstep. There is this emerging touring circuit there, as we're talking about. Over the next 5 years, are you planning to get more into that region if you're not already? Frank, this might be one for you.
Look, I was there a month ago, and I was having a look around and seeing how it works over there. Look, for us, for our level of business, whether would it be for, I would say myself, or even for our festival businesses, I just couldn't get my head around how we would make it work, and how we could make it work financially, or how we could make it work on a promotional level. Because I don't know if you guys are aware, there is no social media in China, like apart from their own platforms like Weibo and QQ and Tencent and all that sort of stuff like that. There is no Facebook. You just can't turn on your phone and you got Facebook and Twitter and, you know, Instagram. It just doesn't exist. So I'm really interested to ask you, how do the locals find out about, obviously, you know, Andrew Bull, guys like that have been there for 15 years, and they've introduced guys like Pete Tong and, you know, Paul Oakenfold and all those guys into that region. And it's the same old guys going there all the time that are just, you know, in clubs and stuff like that. But how does a new young band out of Australia, how do they publicise themselves over there? Because not everyone speaks Chinese and can get onto Weibo or, you know.
Yeah, I mean, look, for a start, there's a kind of, you know, a lot of China particularly, but a lot of developing countries have these kind of grey areas, right? Where in China the grey area is the VPN. So they reckon up to 200 million people have VPNs, which is, you know, for those that don't know what that is, virtual private network, which basically connects you to a server somewhere else and pings your request through that server to then, so you can access Facebook through your VPN, and as I said, up to 200 million people have those in China. We think in our more stoned and paranoid moments that the government actually has created the VPN, these big commercial VPNs, because what better way to control your people than give them a way to jump the Great Firewall, which is what we call the sort of perimeter that blocks all of the YouTubes and Facebooks and Twitters, than to allow people to have a VPN, those that have the education or whatever to know what they are, but that you can also monitor the traffic going through that, and you also make money out of it because you charge people $30 or $50 a year. So at least 200 million people have access to the outside world, limited as it is. And, you know, some of these people have made businesses out of, you know, for example, there's a Youku channel. Youku is the Chinese YouTube. There's a Youku channel that the guy just makes a lot of money because there's a rev share on Youku for content that gets hits. He just rips music videos.
But that's not for Western.
He rips them off YouTube, and then he sticks them up on Youku as soon as they're there, and he has millions of subscribers, and he makes tons of money out of it. So, you know, and that's all Western content. So, you know, there's this grey area that exists, both a lot of people jumping the Great Firewall to get out, and a lot of people actually using it to their advantage to basically take content for free and make money off it.
You can't argue with 200 million people. I mean, that's just...
It's a lot of people.
It's a lot of people.
But look, I was surprised that, you know, a festival like Storm, you know, in a city of 40 million people in the CBD area, which I could be wrong there, you know, only had like, I'm just going to say the figure that I got told, but 40,000.
Promoter exaggeration. The
Promoter exaggerated.
Venue only holds 10,000.
Oh, yeah, well, even so, you know, you'd think that, you know, out of a city of 40 million people, there'd be a lot more people at that.
Yeah, I mean, look, the simple fact is that Asia, you know, has been, and particularly China, but I think Asia more generally, you know, has been pretty slow to the party, right? Because of socioeconomic situation.
And so much of this music's been kept from them as well.
Well, it's not just music; it's everything, right? There's a language barrier, which is a big thing for Western content. But beyond the language barrier, there's also just people didn't have computers. You know, people didn't have TVs. There was no Western media appropriated in those regions until kind of 10 years ago, 12 years ago. So the kids. You know, you imagine you're a kid growing up, right? Or you're 20 years old now. Your parents did not have anything. You know, in China, in 1980, you know, they only had the only music that you could get anywhere in China was the 8 revolutionary operas and the words to Mao set to music. I think I said that on my last panel. So in 30 years, they've gone from that to suddenly having everything, you know, unlimited content through the internet. You know, they have no curated streams, right? There are no trusted voices. My parents had records, shit records, but they still had records, and they played them to me, and I kind of listened to them, and I got a feel for it. You know, when I was 13, my older brother's friends and were all going to gigs and saying you should go and listen to this band and all that kind of stuff. No one from the older generation in China ever, or Asia more generally, had any of that stuff. So it's just starting anew, and that's a massive opportunity for everyone.
Paul, is there any movement from Billion's end, though, like looking at that market? Are you doing deals with other touring agencies around Asia to get artists down here and have them do a tour along the way? Because that seems to be where the economic model's going.
I don't. I receive a lot of bands, my international clients, when they land to Australia, just starting to sort of tickle Asia. They're coming through, and so I just listen to what they got to say about it. At the moment, there's no, like, if Archie came to these panels and said the bands were making money, then I'd probably ring him and say, can you help some of the bands I do make money in Asia? Because it's I mean, part of the reason I set up Billions in Australia as a representative agency for international bands is because I don't believe it's correct that UK and US agents represent for Australia. It's like an old colonial model, and I know more about Australian market than a US agent in LA who, you know, it's just, if we have a quiz, I always win about the Australian venues, you know. So in that context, for me to try then to proclaim that I could do Asia from Australia, I just don't have the cultural knowledge or background to do it.
Isn't that where a partnership would come up?
Well, we just had a talk in the toilets about that, actually. So it's in a different cubicle, but we had a talk.
I think I mean, from an outsider point of view, you see all these pieces coming up. You see these, you know, the NH7 OML guys doing it in India, and what you're doing in China. And there's all these pieces building, and I think there's going to be this market. Australians are going to be able to.
I mean, I think
travel around that region.
when Paul says there's no money or no bands making any money, I mean that's a fallacy. Sorry, Paul.
I just need to refer back to yesterday's panel when you said you made money 3 times in 11 years.
No, I'm not making any money. Well, we actually do make money, but through the brand. As I said, the band side is more of a kind of development thing, a long-term strategy. But you know, we paid Jason Mraz, for example. I mean, it's, you know, we paid him $2.5 million last year for a sync and a short tour because Volkswagen wanted us to do that. But there are a ton of brands. You know, Mika we brought through earlier this year, and Tencent, who, as I alluded to before, have more money than sense. You know, they paid him through us, $50,000 for a 1-hour live stream of his concert. You know, there's a lot of money there because the market is so big, and because a lot of people are aggressively staking out ground without necessarily wanting an immediate return or needing an immediate return. There's an enormous amount of money there. It's just where it's going, and a lot of it is just dribbling off into the ether. But actually, some of it is going into the pockets of artists. And you know, we've booked some seriously random people. I mean, 2 years ago we booked Richard Marx. Do you remember Richard Marx? Do you remember anyone remember Hazard? I could sing it if you want. But you know, we paid him $350,000 to do 3 songs on the New Year's gala for CCTV. You know, this is Richard Marx, who probably hasn't been paid $350,000 since 1984. You know,
but this is my. I mean, I do regular touring, and this is what I'm saying about local knowledge is king to me. Even if I'm going on a holiday, I like to go somewhere I know someone who can show me all the good shit to do. And to access those opportunities currently, you know, I just have no idea what's going on there. So I would need the expertise of someone like Archie to do that. You know, we'd need to have an alliance rather than me going to try be sort of, you know, king of Asia or something. It's not.
But the idea is that there are 50 or 100 of me around Asia now, you know, and a lot of Westerners have settled in the region because, you know, a lot of people have been frustrated with the mature markets of Australia and America and London. I mean, that's the reason I went. I tried to do this in London, and, you know, there was just no chance. So I was like, I'm just going to go to China and try it there.
Well, we're going to have to move on. We're going to start now. We're going to go into the VR portion of the discussion. Joel, for those who missed your panel yesterday, can you tell us a little bit about what you spoke about there, and you know, your viewpoint on how VR is creating new potential business models for artists?
Cool. Hands up if you know what virtual reality is. Hands up who don't. Okay, cool. Everyone know what augmented reality is? Yes? All right. 360 video. Okay, cool. Yeah, basically the virtual reality industry is going to be growing at about 13,000% year on year. That's about 6 times that of the iPhone, the highest selling piece of technology ever. Facebook, Google, Samsung, Sony, HTC are all in it, all releasing headsets 2016. Also, all your mobile phones are already virtual reality devices. You just need something, what is it? Like this to put your phone in, and then you put that on your face, and then you're in a different reality. It's like stepping into a video game or a video. So 360 video allows you to capture moments in time, and experiencing that content through a device like that gives you this incredible sense of presence, like feeling like you are actually there. It's a physiological response. Your brain is completely tricked, and if the floor fell out from underneath you, you'd shoot yourself. So Paul McCartney, White Stripes, Bjork, Beck, all of these people are doing it already. So the example of this sort of in context I use is with Woodstock. So if you imagine all of this technology, smartphones, VR, all of that stuff, social media existed back in 1969. And they captured their event with 360 video and captured hundreds of hours worth of content. Then right now, 46 years later, you could take out your mobile phone, download the Woodstock VR app, put that to your face and you could stand next to Jimi Hendrix so close that you could touch him and actually feel like you're actually there. You know, so a lot of people would pay money for that experience, and you might only pay, like, say, $10 or something like that, but most people would. So if you extrapolate out, 46 years worth of, the amount of, the population that would love to that experience, paying $10 a year, you're looking at one single event making a profit of, sort of $30 billion over its lifetime and indefinitely into the future, because archived events are revenue streams that don't switch off. Once you've captured a historic moment in time, it gains value the older it gets. So Woodstock actually lost $1.4 million at the event. It took them a decade to pay off. But if this technology existed, then, a few decades down the track, they'd have billions. So this is the opportunity that's on the horizon with the way emerging technology is going to affect the music industry, particularly with events.
Opening up to the rest of the panel on that, do you agree? Do you disagree? Are you thinking about that element of, is Stereosonic filming everything and trying to think about that sort of stuff?
Look, I'm not really up to speed with the whole virtual reality thing. I do know that SFX as a company in New York have been looking at the whole virtual reality world, but I can't comment on it. I just don't know enough about it.
I mean, again, a lot of my examples are China specific, but you'll get pop stars in China now doing live streams, maybe not VR, but certainly live streams, and getting 2 to 5 million people logging on and paying kind of micro payments, talking 30 cents or 50 cents or whatever for the experience. And I know that, our festival, we had three different application companies come to us and ask if they could film all of our stages in 3D, in 360, to use as examples or PR for their apps. I think it's coming. I think for sure. You look at the porn companies. Porn companies are experimenting in it, and obviously, VR for porn is probably a very simple use of it. But generally, where the porn companies go, everyone else follows, right?
They were the earliest adopters of the technology.
Yeah. I just want to know, how do you get around the copyright issue? Because I know that we've asked to do Stereosonic, for example, to do a live broad stream with YouTube globally was an absolute nightmare, because we had to actually physically get playlists of all the DJs and what they were playing, and if we couldn't get them and they wouldn't agree, we actually had to take that section out. So we had to pre-license almost all the music that was getting played in that that section. So how do you get away with it in your world?
Well, this is where the Future Music Industry Network comes into it. That's an old music industry paradigm. Like, all of these constraints that limit innovation are what's killing the music industry. So we're approaching it as if that model never existed, and we're going to build a new model that only exists, that operates for everybody, that works, and we're going to use
the APRA guys would be freaking out if this didn't.
But surely it's no different than putting out a DVD. Like, surely it's no different than a band putting out a DVD.
It's just a different delivery mechanism, So when I talk about, a Google Cardboard, for example, that costs as much as a digipack used to be to make in China. But when so it'll bring back the artwork, it'll have the artwork on top of it, and you can use augmented reality. And when you put your phone over the top of that, cover, that will animate, it will come alive, it'll download that album right to that person's mobile device.
But you got to admit that the music component of a music festival and the experience that's part of the experience.
Nothing will ever replace that.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, there must be an obstacle there, because we had a huge obstacle just doing a global, and it was part of RED, the World AIDS Day. So we just had no favours. We had to go through it. So
I mean, I think, again, one of the things, I did a TEDx talk about 7 years ago in Shanghai, and the talk was about the leapfrog effect, which is basically developing countries, leap over mature economies, because we don't have any precedent. We don't have any legal. I mean, you ask how we get 360-degree streams from all the artists licensed. We don't. we asked them all, are you okay with it? They all say kind of yes. Because it's China, there's no expectation that they could ever make any money out of that. So they're like, fuck it, it's promotion, we'll just do it. And so the same way that, you know, in China there was a great opportunity, I felt, for us to leap over the petrol car into an electric car or a hybrid or whatever, because we didn't have that kind of existing network of service stations that were all petrol dominated. We could have just gone straight to electric cars, the same way that in India or Africa, you know, people have gone straight to mobile without going to the computer first, right? And straight to 4G without going to a wired connection in your house. All of those things mean that probably the test beds for this VR, the test beds for a lot of this new technology will be in developing countries because there's no legal precedent.
Agreed. Could I the thing about the argument about sort of innovation and the constraints of things preventing progress, I think that one of the things that technology companies have seen as a constraint is the need for artists to make money. And I think what people have missed sort of something happening is that traditionally bands made money from selling their content. That's what you did. You made some songs and made some money. And the tech companies have come in, and it's almost like they've been so exciting to everybody that everyone's dropped their pants on content and just let them take it. So they've developed a culture where people just don't want to pay for stuff. So just like we have water and electricity in our houses, I think that people see music now as a utility almost. It's expected and taken for granted, and the amount of respect for the source of it, which is the artist, so equivalent to the source of water being rain or whatever, people just don't give a shit about those people. They just expect to have it.
But I also believe that was the artists and their representatives who caused that problem in the first place.
No, they did. That's what I'm saying. Everyone's dropped their pants. And for the industry, I think it's too late to me. I don't care what the content form is. But you look at any content-driven business, whether it's music or news or anything, they're all pretty fucked because no one's willing to pay for content. And
but could VR change? I mean, could
that's
a new
exactly what's about to
experience
change.
No, but where the traffic is where the money is. And I think if the music industry doesn't realign itself and start realising that content's basically fucked and getting more and more worthless, they need to start trying to get the money out of the traffic, because that's where the power of music is. It's its ability to mobilise people and get them excited about something and inspire them. So if your band can get 10,000 people through something like a website or a song or a video or whatever, there needs to be techniques the music industry needs to pioneer that enables that traffic to make the bands money rather than money going to Facebook and Google and companies that are making plenty of money already.
And that's what the Future Music Industry Network is designed to do, because all of these technologies are actually coming out really predictably. So we can present all these innovations to the music industry and basically say, this is what's coming. It hasn't hit the market yet, but we can now have this is the first time in history, music history, where we can actually look at technology before it lands, and we can say, okay, let's make this work for us rather than have it happen to us.
But what Frank's saying, so from my observation of big technology, which requires lots of money invested in it, is that, for example, like labels and people who own the rights to significant catalogues of music are more likely to control those portals and make the money. So, again, old situation, a band would get money for mechanical royalties or some money for airplay, for example, or for a sale, actually, is probably a better example. You get some money from selling a record before. Labels owning Spotify and getting big checks from Spotify for just a vibe money thing. And it enables them to have shit rates for the artist on the streaming.
Absolutely,
And I don't see why that would be any different in the VR world. I just think it's going to be, here's another cool thing we can fuck people with.
It's actually really, really different, like mainly because it's going to be a platform dedicated to, artist control. So if you use the platform that we're creating, it allows you to create virtual gigs, essentially, and create your own type of YouTube channel environment where you can direct your traffic directly to your own content. And there's enough of a music population to start essentially its own micro industry outside of the ones that the major labels have relationships with the tech guys, because the content providers in the middle have been fucked like this whole time. Like, nobody has really been accommodating their needs, and there is enough of those people to start to look at emerging technologies and go, hey, it's cheap enough, it's affordable enough and accessible enough for us to organize ourselves around it and do something that actually works for us. We know enough about how online traffic works and how reach works, and we can start to funnel that into new mediums and tech has typically created some innovation, dropped it on the marketplace, and everyone's had to react to it as quickly as possible. This is the opposite. This is where the tech is there. We've got a year before it's really going to mature. I'm bringing all of that information to the music industry and saying, here it is, let's work on it together. And then in 12 months' time, we'll have a new model that accommodates all of this stuff that is actually going to allow us to have a career. And yeah, we'll fix the music industry. Like, that's the way that I see it.
So you think a band could make money having thousands of people running around with their headsets on in their lounge rooms?
Yeah, pretty much.
So it's possible.
It is possible, absolutely.
Because it's that thing.
I think again, it's about access, right? In a place like Melbourne, probably not, because in Melbourne you can see 100 bands a minute if you're so inclined, right? So if you want that live music experience, but if you live, again, Australia's probably quite a good example. If you live in a village in the Northwest Territories and you never get the access to go and do these things, or it costs you $2,000 to fly to Byron or whatever else. Yeah. Same with China. You know, if there's Storm Festival in Shanghai, that's this huge thing that you never get to experience, and then you're living 20 hours away or whatever by train, but you have the opportunity to basically have an immersive experience. I can see how it works as long as it's priced at the right level, because the trouble with a lot of these things is that people come out with a pricing structure that's completely crazy. Exactly. I think even $10 is a lot to imagine people in the first instance paying for something like that. But if you priced it at, like the people in, the companies in China are doing, they're pricing it at 3 renminbi or 5 renminbi, which is eminently affordable, then tons of people try it. And 2 to 5 million people will sign up to a stream to watch it.
It's like with Uber giving everyone so many free rides for so long, and that when they first came to Australia, I mean, I got countless free rides, and it got me hooked to it, and it just. Well, and then you realise how much better it is than alternatives.
And that's the drug dealer principle, right?
Yeah.
Get people hooked by giving them freebies.
Hello.
We're gonna. Do you want to add something to it, Mom?
Well, just in terms of it being, I think from a management and a PR perspective. I'm a complete Luddite, so I'm kind of watching you all going, aye. But I think, it's all discovery. So for Little May, who we just went overseas to the States, we've had, I think it was 10 million streams on Spotify. And I hung around after a gig we had. It was a Monday night in Chicago. There were 150 people in the room. We've just released our first record. It's very early for them. A really engaged audience, and hung around and spoke with those people. I was like, how did you hear about this band? All through Spotify, which, is really quite incredible for an artist at that level. And I think it's really hard as well in a management capacity, because a lot of the major labels are they're freaking out about the fact that, all of the content in SoundCloud and whatever, all of that needs to be monetized. But it's incredibly important in order then on the PR side to be getting in the Hype Machine charts and creating a buzz for yourself and profiling. That all depends on SoundCloud. Like, they require SoundCloud in order for you to have that level of coverage. So it may not be that the financial return is obviously not in that content, but it comes with people going to gigs and developing that artist to a point where they start to actually see return on that investment.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that. And the media landscape's changing. You've now got major labels hiring people whose job it is simply and purely to put songs into playlists. That's their job. Working right alongside a radio plugger, whereas
not just majors. We've just done that too. We've just employed Rob, who's been there for about 6 months, and we've seen the landscape changing, and we've actually stopped doing physical releases earlier this year on the 1st of January. And I just saw that, you've got to have someone in-house that's going to put those as much as everyone says, it's really easy to put a playlist together, right? Try doing it, and trying to cover all of them. You just can't do it. But we've created a job. It's not only majors. I think most indies will definitely flow through for that.
Is that the future? I mean, is that kind of, at least for now, the future of promotion for an artist is and as a method of discovery, the playlist?
I didn't realise how big it was, but it's fantastic. Like the whole, Spotify, especially, as a discovery platform, is fantastic. If you can get yourself into one of those Spotify playlists, it's definitely creates results, and it just the flow on from that is fantastic. Have you had any experience?
Yeah, well, I was talking to Larry before about an artist called Wishes that we've just started working with. It's very early. We're about two or 3 weeks in. We're not getting a huge amount of radio support at this stage, but did actually pitch it to someone at Spotify, and it made it into the Australian New Zealand playlist. It's had 100,000 plays in 4 days, and it's now number 8 on the viral charts worldwide.
It's fantastic. The Spotify and streaming has really opened up music. It's a whole new frontier, and it's fantastic. Look, you can't rely on Triple J anymore. You can't rely on commercial radio. Even yesterday's panel at the Triple J panel that was on yesterday, they want to see some activity and, push and happening like that. Whereas with Spotify, if you can get into those playlists, which is quite simple, you can even just email them and they'll include you. That's a great tool now.
Deezer, which is one of the Spotify competitors, they take a slightly alternative approach because they're not the biggest by market volume. They actually have editorial teams in multiple different countries. So we're the editorial team in China, and they pay us, 1,000 euros a month to put together 15 Chinese language playlists because they're trying to grow their markets in each different country. And if there's anything missing, we then put them in touch with the labels locally. And so they're trying to, Spotify's just the big bucket, right, with playlists. Deezer's actually trying to take a slightly more curatorial approach. And it's really interesting because, they're now starting to sell those playlists to hotels in China, right? So there's a whole new sort of secondary, tertiary business in paying people to create playlists and then selling that on. I mean, it's pretty insane.
Are you taking any Western?
Yeah, we slip stuff in there all the time,
Great, get Rob on.
So I presume everyone's excited about all this because there's a thought that the promo of Spotify and other things, it establishes careers or leads to something else other than fame, I'm assuming, like a career for the musicians or something. But the concern I have is, obviously I'm focused on live touring, is that if I go back a few years, it might have cost you $20 to buy an album and then $15 to go and see a show. But when you buy an album, you invest in the body of work of the artist, so you're more likely to get engaged with it emotionally. And then when the band tours, the band knows you've already paid $20 for the full album. As you've got the sales figures, you're only expecting the person to pay $15 or $20, the same amount of money to go and see you live. And that relationship makes sense to me. But in the current model, the promotion is all reliant on content, which you're not getting money for. Then you're expecting to go into a market where you've got fans and charge them $50, $60, $70, $80 to make the band viable. I just think that if they've listened to the single 100 times, the emotional connection is not as strong or as long-lasting. And I think it's going to lead to a deflation in ticket prices over the next 5 to 10 years. And because it's just too much of a gap. If you get heaps of stuff for free, if you could walk down the street and get hundreds of, I'm about to be rude, I'm sorry, but walk down the street and get hundreds of hand jobs for free, I wouldn't use that street to get to a brothel to pay for it, if you know what I mean.
I disagree, Paul, because,
You would still pay for the...
No, I'm just saying, if you're going to... but anyway, so, look, if you're going to only hear stuff on Spotify and you love that band and you're going to see and it clocks up the spins and everything, you're still going to pay the money to go and see. It's not going to undervalue what the tours are.
I also think you can't tell the kids what to do. I mean,
that's exactly right.
This, I think, is the mistake that we make as older gentlemen of the music industry, older gentlemen and younger lady, I think, but certainly older gentlemen of the music industry. I think that's where we always make the mistake, right? We tell people how they should be consuming, and the kids just turn around and go, "Well, fuck that! I'm going to do it my own way, old man." Anyway,
yeah, but it's not an age thing. It's pure economics that. If
They're
I've
still
enjoyed
paying
your stuff,
hundreds of dollars to go to shows.
Well, yeah, it's in the context of touring, it's become a global, because all these the sort of distribution of the content is free and it's global. Bands now more and more are starting a global career immediately because you kind of have to, because you can't just sit in your own town anymore and kick around for 10 years. It just doesn't have there's nothing for you there.
Did that ever work?
What's that? Well, no, not necessarily, but it's the idea that If you're immediately global, you can't tour globally and make money on a $10 or $20 or $30 ticket. I mean, it's just not reasonable.
I'm still sad that people don't listen to full albums. Like, I still believe that albums are a great thing, and I still believe that they will have a comeback at some point, right? But we can't deny the fact that people aren't listening to full albums. They are listening to playlists. They are listening to chunks. And I go to festivals now, and it makes me sad because you walk around the festival and everyone stands there like that, smoking fags and talking to their mates, and then the big song comes on, everyone goes, yeah, he sings along to the song, and then goes to the next act and does the same thing, right? Because it's a singles-based.
Yeah, and declining passion means less willingness to pay.
Yeah, but I think that we can't tread back. You know, we have to look, again, and I suppose that's the point of this panel, right?
Yes, this is the future of the...
we have to look forward, and we have to go, right, this is how the kids listen to music these days. And let's face it, the kids are the ones who are, and kids by, I'm 40, so kids, anyone under 30.
But we can actually go forward and go back at the same time. Like, so I like the idea of bringing back the album cover just without the disc. So using augmented reality, and can I just give a quick example?
It doesn't involve me, does it, in any way?
So this is just an image, right? And it's got an app on my phone that when it sees that image, it's going to create a digital game. Can anybody see that? No. Alright, so but basically what happens is when this phone detects that, it then becomes a game. And then I'm playing a game where I'm killing zombies that are running around on this. And I can zoom right down, be millimeters off this thing, and I'll still be interacting with this content. That's a way in which we can engage people with the packaging which we deliver music in. And we can give them a whole album on that. They can download straight to their phone. They can then put their headphones in and listen to it and appreciate that. They can immediately then share that on social media. So there is opportunities to return back to some tangible, something that we can appreciate, something we can put in our hands. And that same packaging can turn into a virtual reality device as well, and you can experience an immersive video clip, you know? So, yeah, there's lots of opportunity. We just need to be exposed to what those opportunities are and try and make sense of them.
And I mean, you know, I went to a show last night in Footscray at, you know, some guys had taken over an old billiards room or pool hall or whatever, and there was a punk show going on. And, you know, it was younger people than me, certainly. I was certainly the only person dressed like this. And, you know, they were kind of quasi-aggressively, like there was no filming, there was no cameras. Most of the kids had dumb phones, you know. And I'm finding a lot more that younger people are kind of pushing against the deluge of content, because it's almost impossible to keep up with everything, right? So they're actually choosing to opt out of that, and they're actually choosing to move away from it. And I believe it'll just be a natural course where people will get deeper, you know, when everyone's sharing everything all the time, and when everyone's instant gratification all the time, the cool kids go, well, if everyone else is doing that, I'm not going to do it, so I'm going to get deep into stuff, and I'm going to get to know about it again. And I just believe it cycles.
Don't underestimate the power of music, I think, is
It'll never die. It never has, and it never will.
Paul, I'd like to, as we're running out of time, so I'd like to quickly talk about, you know, the live stage for you. I mean, at the end of the day, your job is to get a band onto the stage, and I mean, is that going to change? Is that a mainstay?
It's that thing of, you know, the most frustrating thing for anyone doing shows, whether you're in a band or promoting a show or whatever, is that often you identify quality in your life. You see a band and you go, this shit's amazing. And if you get people in front of the band, they have a great time and they appreciate the quality of it. The difficulty is obviously getting people to actually get to the show. So one of the most depressing situations ever is to have 100 people in a 10,000 people venue watching an amazing band, because you sort of know that 9,900 other people could have had a great time too if they'd bothered to show up. And I guess the challenge going forwards is just that thing of making sure that the means that we have to connect with people with music are generating enough emotional response and passion from people. So, I mean, I know as a kid I would have taken a bullet for my favourite band, you know, possibly not a lethal one, but I would have taken an injury. You know, if it meant me taking it or the singer of my favourite band, I would have thought, well, you know, it's going to fuck the show up if I don't take this, you know. So, I don't know, and it's that sort of passion that makes, you know, people buy stuff from artists, you know, and so...
But I think it's ubiquity that's killing it, right? So actually, you would have taken a bullet for your favourite band because probably you didn't get to see your favourite band very often, right?
I was always in hospital, you see.
But in Perth, you know, I'd imagine that the bands didn't come around that often, right?
No, of course, and when they did, it was very exciting. And it's that thing.
So now that you can go and see 100 bands a week in pretty much any city in the world, you know, people are like, well, actually, it's kind of the apathy kicks in because you can't be bothered to deal with that volume.
When there's more availability, more channels of media and information, then you're less passionate about all of them. And individually, those channels have less money individually to spend on content. The whole cycle of it just means sort of the risk of low passion. And with live, I do feel like I'm actually doing something that's not music at the moment, which is a tour for a podcast, and I've found it very interesting. And I do think there's some good tips here for music, and I don't really know exactly what they are, but the podcast information is really interesting because it engages people in a weekly story. So they're doing episodes of a podcast, and when I got the data from the podcast, it's giving me every city. It shows me how many people have downloaded the podcast each week for the last month. And what that tells me is that those people are so this particular thing was like 50,000 people in Australia every month are repeatedly downloading the episodes. So I know those people are engaged in the story, and I know from that they're passionate about it. So like you might have been excited about Home and Away when you were a kid or something. And when knowing that, I look at the stats, and I know that when I announce the live tour, that those people are going to they have a passion or an interest in it that's going to maybe mobilise them to buy a ticket. And what I found really interesting then is that the promotion of it, all the company in America did is just put on the front of the podcast like, hey, Australia, we're coming to do some shows. And it sold like $200,000 worth of tickets in the first week. And I've still not found a single friend who's ever listened to this fucking thing, right? I ask everybody. But it's going to do $300,000 or $400,000 of sales in Australia and sell out. There's 2 Athenaeums here, Recital Hall in Sydney. It's big venues, expensive ticket, $70. And I say it's like a mystery to me even, and I'm you know, living the dream as the promoter on it. But I think it's interesting because it reminds me that when you have an album, you are engaging people in a story about a band and getting them engaged in the story. And I realise that things like Facebook and things like that have sort of, they make the stories too, I think, boring actually. I don't, you know, a photo of like a hash brown in America.
But yesterday they came out with new stats that sharing on Facebook had gone down from 57% to 36% year on year.
Wow.
And so, you know, people are already leaving in droves because Facebook is a mature platform and people are bored of it. But, you know, people are on Snapchat and people are on you know...
But the YouTube stars. I mean, this idea of, you know, there's Bethany Motors and these people who...
We may not like it. I certainly don't like it. Someone forced me, one of the organisers of Music Matters that organised the YouTube Fan Fest, made us all go to the YouTube Fan Fest in Singapore.
Thank you, Jasper. Yes, thank you.
My God. It was horrific for me as a 40-year-old man, but... You know, to the 15-year-old Singaporeans, you know, they were crazy for this stuff. The chef that cooks with a cat. I mean, they said to me, you know, when they were bringing it in and explaining to me what it was, we know these guys have no talent, but we don't care because they have subscribers. And I was like, what an awful way to look at promoting something. But, you know, that's just the way it rolls, and who am I to say different?
So, Paul, I just want to ask you something, right? With bands, like I'm 50 years old, right? So I've been going out since I was the 70s, right? So one of the things that I'm finding is energy. And that's why I love the dance scene, because the dance scene now, going to a dance club is crazy. Like there's people going crazy in there.
That's the pingers, not the music, buddy.
No, hang on. Listen. But back in the day when I used to go to, you know, Bombay or, you know, Martinis or Hearts or any of those places like that and see local bands, it was or the ballroom or the venue, it was absolutely crazy. It was like going to a dance club now, right? And now I've found over time, what's happened with the band scene, I think they've gone boring and very safe. And it's always the same thing. You know, no one's putting effort into their production.
But I was at the show last
don't agree
night.
with that at all.
I was at the show last night. 5 punk bands, local punk bands, 300 people in the room. A circle pit so frightening that that I wouldn't go anywhere near. I mean, of course, dressed like this, I wouldn't look very good in the circle pit. But
I'd like to see it.
yeah, but
I
I
haven't
mean,
been to a punk night since the 80s.
but that's what I'm saying. It's you know, it's coming back, right? The electronic scene is getting boring. I think I look at EDM now, and I think
I totally agree with you 100%. But what I found was in the last 10 years, as EDM and electronic was coming up, and all those riders started expanding that, we want, 600 shots of CO2 and, fireworks and bloody people flying out of helicopters or whatever. I saw the band scene production going down. Like, it's just become more and more stripped down because that's what everyone went into this mindset, that's how it's got to be. But then you look at the crowd and it's just Couplesville, like you're watching there and you just like,
no, it
going?
wasn't Couplesville last night. I promise
yeah,
you.
but you were at a punk night, like
but that's where the energy's gone back to. It's a cycle, right? I mean, I go to an EDM thing now.
Go to the Northcote any night of the week, and it's like scientists sitting there, drinking beers.
That's a middle class suburb, right? Now it didn't used to be, but it's now a middle class suburb where people are going to see middle class stuff. Whereas you go to Footscray, which is where all the kids are. Again, it's the energy's where the kids are.
That's exactly right.
Always, and the people that go out 3 times a week, even if they can't afford to, are the kids, right? If you didn't work your friends, right, at 50 years old, how many times do they go out?
A lot.
See, I think the energy is where the passion is, right? The kids have got more passion and more angst, obviously, than an average 40 or 50-year-old man or whatever. But it's that thing of, I agree with you, but I've done some experiments in the last 12 months.
But you must agree, the energy's gone from where it was 25 years ago.
Absolutely, but you can capture it if you take a slightly different approach. And I mean, I've been doing these secret events where I have a festival that sells out without announcing a lineup, and so I have a bit of trust with the patrons. So in the city in Perth, I've started doing a thing called Special Occasions, and I just announce, I say, it's 2 Wednesdays away, it's $80. That's it, that's my promotion just thing. I sell all the tickets, and then I tell them the day before where it is, and on the night they found out who the band is. But I find by not telling people what's going on, everything's so available at the moment. They've got no fucking idea who's playing, where it is, what they're eating or drinking. They've got no idea about anything. It's almost like it just generates this excitement that they haven't had for a while. And by the time they get to the show, and I've had some reasonable sized bands play these events, so I just get them on a night off. So Sharon Jones has done one in a little 200 capacity basement. And when people turn up and she walks in the room, they lose their fucking minds, because I think it's that thing. It's actually hard because of the amount of information people receive and the amount of content they're getting. It's hard to be incredibly exciting. I mean, if you sit down and watch someone using Tinder, that's people that they're slapping in the face there. Hundreds of, they have a story and a life.
That's a
and
really good way of putting it.
They could be, there could be hundreds of beautiful people there, right? But the amount of time they get given in that environment is not really respectful. And it's like that with everything. And, you've got to find a way to connect people. And there are things like a little warehouse party, a secret event, a crazy show in a crazy place. And I think places like the Northcote and the bricks and mortar venues that just have black box, good PA, I think they're in, they need to...
They're in danger, for sure.
They're in danger
but
in the future.
Having said that, when I was in China a month ago, I was just saying, Archie, earlier that, we walked from the Bund to this concert hall area, and we went through some of the suburbs there, and we went to a few bars, and we went to that place that I was describing. I can't remember. Yeah, what it was called. And there was these underground bands playing, and it was fantastic. Like, it was just really raw. It reminded me,
And that's the difference, because these kids haven't been exposed to it every day of every week for the last 20 years. And I think that's the problem, right? It's ubiquity. It's everywhere. And so what needs to happen now, and it's not, we won't get it right. We won't sit up here and predict the future of music. The kids, sorry for calling everyone kids, but I feel very old today. But the 15, 16, 17-year-olds who don't vibe with the current system will invent their own, and we won't guess it. We'll try and run after it when we see our business running away from us. but we just never get it.
And we have
isn't that
to
what it's always been about? Like,
And that's what's
those
cool about it.
Younger generation is what throughout the history of music, whether you go back to 150 years of recorded industry business, it's always been aimed at that younger market, and like.
So
that's what we've got
the
to
next
sort of-
panel, everyone should be under 20. Like the next panel on the future of music, I really believe that. I think it should be people under the age of 20 because I'm
How
out
many
of,
people here are under 20? Not many.
What's the future of music, guys? Come on.
But that's the thing. It is in their hands, and they're going to tell us based on what VR they use, what shows they go
Exactly,
to.
yeah.
But also,
that's all that matters.
I don't think it will be. I don't think it will be conscious.
Of course not.
We're consciously trying to work out how to maintain our businesses, basically, maintain our quality of life, maintain whatever. I mean, maybe not Paul because he's still taking bullets, but the rest of us, we're trying. I still love music. I love going to these places with these people who I didn't know that there was a scene. I mean, I asked everyone at the conference yesterday. I told them I was going to this place in Footscray. Not a single person, all from Melbourne, knew it was going on, knew that scene existed. And that was a wonderful thing, that in a city like this, there can still be scenes that outside of that scene, no one knows what it is. And maybe in 10 years' time, that scene will be the mainstream scene, and those kids will be sitting where we are, probably.
Well, we have to leave it there. Give a round of applause for the panel. We unfortunately don't have time for questions, but we're around all day, so feel free to come up and say hello if you have any questions. Thanks, everyone, for coming.